Hi, I'm Kevin McAdams. I've been a broadcaster, producer, a soldier, a retail manager, and a teacher, and now I'm a podcaster. You know, I've wanted to do a podcast for years, but I could never decide what it should be about. Should it be news, sports, politics, my favorite sci-fi? Then it hit me. I know a lot of people who do a lot of interesting things and have a lot of cool stories to tell, and I thought, let's tell those stories. So it doesn't have to be the same thing every week. It can be what I say it is. Hi, and welcome to episode 5. Rodney Rodriguez. They don't know how hard this shit used to be. Rodney Rodriguez is another one of my old school gang from the KMAX sports days. Going back to around 2007, he came on board to broadcast Westwood High School football, but I first met him a few years before that during the old racing broadcasts from Thunderhill Raceway. He was one of the racers then. In fact, he grew up racing on Texas short tracks with his dad and listening to a tiny little AM radio station in Lockhart, and dreamed of living in both worlds. And, well, now he does. Rodney became a track announcer. Now, if you've never been to a short track auto race before, well, I highly recommend you go. There's nothing like it anywhere. And the track announcer is the one who keeps the show moving. He's equal parts Master of Ceremonies, play-by-play guy, and hip-hop hype man. Not only entertaining the crowd, but keeping the show on time. It's not a job for just anyone, and the people who can do it well are very few and very far between. Rodney is one of the best of that rare breed. In 2018, he started the Revved Up Sports Show online, then took it to the radio, and now he's everywhere. Rodney Rodriguez is one of the most important voices in the short track racing world, and he's done it with a knack for networking, preparation, and hard work, followed by more of the same, day in and day out. He's got a lot to say about growing a good podcast and doing a good show in general, and about not missing out on opportunities. You know, he said a lot of things in this conversation that would have made a great title for the episode, but this one just seems to define his philosophy on success in an amusingly backhanded way. As in, just because it's easy to do doesn't mean to do it half-ass. And Rodney Rodriguez does nothing half-ass. So here we go. Episode 5 with Rodney Rodriguez. They don't know how hard this shit used to be. So you and I met. You and I met in the early days of KMAX Sports, right? You're another one of those original guys.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of back in the days of Thunderhill Raceway.
Roll right.
Then, yeah. But I mean, you guys were already doing what you were doing with streaming. I mean, goes without saying, you and Chuck Licata, I mean, y'all set the tone for everything that people are doing now. And I think that's probably the first time that we crossed paths. And, I wasn't sure what I was doing at the time, but I knew what you guys were doing. So I sat back and watched what you guys did because, hell, I wanted to be a football announcer. And it was
I'm glad we were able to make that happen for you.
Right. It's like maybe one day I'll get to be on that network. And you guys really chartered me a path that has led to really cool stuff.
Yeah, of course, you've got the greatest podcast in the world in the racing community. I mean, I see you all over the place, and I hear about you from everybody I talk to in that world. I hear about you. You've become like one of the authorities on things.
Well, Kevin, what that really was, and the whole podcast thing, I love talking about sports and all of that, but I really had to zero in on something that nobody else was doing. And that's where people that want a podcast, that want to do live streams and everything. I mean, you have to find that little niche right there where you can be different, because the beautiful thing about podcasting and streaming is, and we've talked about this.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing is that anybody can do it. And the bad part is that anybody can do it. It's just, there's a lot.
Oh, yeah. I've said since the early days, just because everybody can doesn't mean they should.
Right. And that's where you have to kind of differentiate yourself. I speak for a living, and find what's going to charter your path. But it, it just goes, it's funny to me how far all of this has come. Think about it, Kevin, to back when you were starting to do this, man. You have to look at this now and think, man, this is crazy to see what this has become.
Oh, it is. And as you know, I left it behind for a number of years.
Hmm.
I just completely walked away. And when I came back, I'm like, okay, I think I'd like to try the, oh crap, science marched on. Ah. And, there was just a very steep catch up curve when I came back into sports broadcasting, sports live streaming in 2019.
Yeah.
Um, and then, okay, I don't remember if you invited me out to your broadcast booth one night or if I kind of invited myself.
No,
I don't
no,
remember,
no.
but
It was me. I mean, it was a Westwood Round Rock game,
yes,
and you came out, and it was a year that Round Rock. I'm trying to think what year that was. 2016, 17, 18. I'm not sure when it was, but that was a year that Round Rock was really good, and Westwood was not so good. And you came out, and I remember you showed up, and you're like, well, it's been a little bit, or whatever the case was. But man, you hit the ground running, and thank goodness, because you and I think, did one of the best broadcasts I've ever been a part of. And the game was horrible, but the content was amazing.
I remember.
So
I remember at one point you were practically interviewing me, and I was telling all the stories from the old days.
yeah, I mean, and that really was that really was the cool thing for me, Kevin, because like I said, you and Chuck, I mean, you guys have launched so many careers, whether we want to call it a career or whatever it is. And John Molise is another guy that was so imperative to helping so many people to get out and do this. And I don't really know if you guys understand what you have done for so many people. I mean, it's fascinating to see where it has grown to.
Well, I think I do, but I didn't always.
Yeah.
I never. Well, that's a whole other can of worms that I'll keep between me and my psychiatrist right now. But suffice it to say, there was a very long time there when I just really didn't believe in myself. And thanks be to God, that's all over now. So,
Yeah.
but hey, I want to credit John Molise with something. Um, okay, we put him onto this, right? And he went and figured out how to do the technical side, right?
Yeah.
So, and where I'm going with that is you start building something, and then you bring in one piece here and one piece there and one piece, and next thing you know, you got something. And that's kind of how it was in the early days.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think one of the things that is so neat for me to watch now is you remember how it was. I mean, back in the day when we would come rolling up to a football stadium or a baseball stadium or a basketball gym, whatever it was, we came in and we were the quote unquote internet guys.
Yeah.
And we came walking in and people would look at us like we were, aliens from Jupiter or wherever it was. I mean, they had no idea of what we were doing. But I think it is so cool right now to see because, and I know a lot of I've got friends in radio, I know you do too,
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, they looked down at us there for a while for what we were doing. And to see now all of them doing this, that's one of those things to me where it's like, take
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I
Take that.
remember back in that first season, there was one sports broadcaster who I won't name, but was basically somebody accustomed to just walking into a press box on a Friday afternoon and say, "Hey, we're here to do your game." And that individual got pretty upset at Chuck because there were two internet streaming crews there and he couldn't just walk in and get a booth. There was
Yeah.
also the case of doing a baseball playoff game down at Texas State, and gentlemen from the visiting team, some small town, I forget, I want to say not Sealy, but somewhere else down there, and he came in and he tried to bust in and physically throw us out of the booth. It's like, well, dude, one, you should have got here. Should have got here a little bit more than 20 minutes before first pitch. But, so yeah, I understand there were people who didn't want it, and I don't know if you know this, but we basically did the first season for free with no sponsors or anything, and we were doing Leander
Has that
Lyons.
changed? Has
What's
that changed? Has that changed?
It has for
I thought
me.
Oh yeah, I know.
Hey, I
Yeah.
don't know about you, brother, but I get what I'm worth these days.
Woo! I'm gonna ring my bell in my studio, my brother.
And we'll talk about your studio here in just a second because I see you everywhere on Facebook. It's just amazing. I'm
Yeah,
just
well,
really happy to see how things have been successful for you in this arena.
well, I got to tell you, I mean, I've said it before. Like I said earlier, I mean, you're you're one of the ones that charted the course, because the whole concept of doing this, while it seems very simple, it is not. It is not. And there are so many different things that are going to come at you each and every time that you show up to a. And that's the funny thing, when people always ask me about, like, with football, it's like, man, it's got to be so cool to go out and just broadcast football games. I'm like, man, if I'm able to get on the air, the battle is won.
Yeah,
The battle
exactly.
is won right there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second, because we were talking about, but before I rolled tape, we were talking about the last time you and I met in person,
Hmm.
which I asked you, do you want to talk about this? And you said, yeah. So it
Sure.
was that, it was the last game of the season for us at Del Valle. And we were at House Park and ran into Rick
Right.
Epstein, who
Yep.
was, now, are you and he partners in IHS Fan or what?
Rick, that is Rick. That's Rick's operation.
Okay.
He relies on me. Thanks to you guys, I've learned a lot of the technical content of how to do all of this. So I was kind of the one that helped launch all of that with learning how to do the different variances of getting something on the air and how to keep it on the air. But yeah, and that's part of the thing that as much as I still love doing this, it drives me crazy, Kevin, because there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of folks that are. This used to be small. This used to be kind of hometown. This was all just a bunch of dudes, that would get together and do this. But when you get in situations like that, to where you've got, with the horn, I mean, Genuine Austin Radio has a full commitment to doing high school sports, and that changes a lot of the variables when it comes to IHS fan, and with you guys in Del Valle, and we've got everything happening. Texan Live is involved, and this used to be super easy, but I mean, now it's like, I refuse to let this be friend or foe, because to me, I got into this to have fun
Mhm.
and to hang out with guys and just have fun. But that's when it gets to be a hell of a lot uncomfortable. And that day was very uncomfortable to me.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background there. And you, let me tell you, well, of course we were broadcasting on Texan Live. We were not
Hmm.
employed by Texan Live. Texan Live had basically deceived the Del Valle athletic department into signing a contract with them. Basically,
Oh,
they
didn't
were
know that.
told that if they wanted me and Daniel Chancellor, on the broadcast, they had to sign with them. And that all comes back to, well, I don't know how deep I can go into that for legal reasons, but
Right.
some things that the aforementioned Chuck Licata had done in my name and talked me into doing.
Mm.
So yada yada
Well,
yada.
and I can honestly tell you, Kevin, with part of that, I mean, I think part of that with what happened that day, I can tell you that the IHS fan webcast network had been removed from some spots before, because of a contracts in place. I mean, whatever
Yeah.
the case was, taken out of a broadcast, and I think it just kind of came to a head that day. But I will say that Rick and you and Rick handle that. I mean, man, you could cut the tension with a knife that day, but I think you both handled it well. I mean, and that's it. That speaks to both of you guys, because I mean, it shouldn't be this hard. These are kids out there doing what they've done all of their lives, and we're just guys trying to broadcast, and we shouldn't be in this competition,
And
unfortunately. But
but and well, first off, you don't know what went on between me and Rick out of your
yeah,
sight. So
right.
it did get pretty tense. And I finally, in the end, just, I think he said something to the effect of, "Don't piss me off." And I gave him Bert Brocker, the then owner of Texan Live. I gave him his personal phone number. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go call my game. It's the last game of the season for us. We'll be lucky if 15 people listen or watch.
Yeah.
And I said, here's your real enemy. Call him. And at this point, I'm like, because, he's down there trying to get us thrown out. And at this point, I've lost 45 minutes of prep time. So at this point, I'm like 15 minutes from air. So, but
yeah,
I want to tell you, and I understand where he was coming from. I had heard about all of that. Trying to get us thrown out, I did not think was a good move, but I understand the motivation where it came from. And some good things came out of that. And a couple, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And the whole thing was exclusive contract here, pay-per-view here. He didn't like the fact that we were running a pay-per-view broadcast. I don't know. And I know there'd been a big dust up between him and Lake Travis, and there was that as well. So after that, I mean, we all got through our game and nobody hurt anybody and we all went our separate ways. Great. After that, I vowed I will never work for a pay-per-view outfit again. I will never. And Daniel Chancellor feels the same way. I'll ask him the same thing. He's going to be my next interview. He'll be the next episode after this one goes. I will never allow my name, image, likeness, voice to be used in any way by a pay-per-view high school broadcaster.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, and unfortunately, because of that, fortunately for me, but the Del Valley Athletic Department agrees with that, just based on the experience they had with Texan Live out of Houston. So just based on that, they're like, you know what? We want you and Chance on the air, and we just assume put it on YouTube, which is what we did.
Yeah, and I think that's where so many folks need to think about it. It needs to be all about the end user. And I can tell you on the IHS fan, platform there with the Horn app and all of that. I mean, it really is for us. I mean, obviously we want to sell advertising. I mean, we need advertising. I mean, we got to pay guys to come out and do this. We got to pay for equipment and so forth and so on. But I mean, what I think many people need to take a step back and look at when it comes to high school sports is think about the end user. Think about the grandmother in Iowa. I mean, think about the uncles in Montana and folks in California. We need to make this as easy as possible for them to take in this content, to get to see their grandkids, to get to see their nephews or nieces or whatever it is in the easiest way possible. And to me, it's not, when it comes to racing, Kevin, it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
When I start talking about pay-per-view for racing and all that, man, gloves are off, man. If you want to consume short track racing, you probably need to pay a little bit because it's expensive to do this. But when it comes to high school sports, if you want to catch a volleyball game, you shouldn't be having to, I mean, I don't want to say get gouged, but you shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a war between you and me and our broadcast companies to try to get viewers and the end user and listeners and watchers and all that. That is not the reason that we got into this. I think about the days with the old KMAC website when you could go to kmacsports.com, you would flip that thing up. These were in the days where, thank goodness, we were audio only. That is all we did. We didn't have to mess with video.
Every day I wish we could just go back to doing a good radio show.
I would love to go back and paint pictures, but you could go to the kmacsports.com website on any given Thursday, or let's just say Friday, and it was just game. And man, wasn't that so nice back then?
Yeah.
Wasn't that so cool? I miss those days.
And Texan Live would tell you, that, okay, you pay our monthly fee and you can watch 100 games. Who the hell wants to watch 100 games that isn't writing for Dave Campbell's Texan Football or doing some lamer than mine ass podcast about it, or writing for a newspaper, or
and the whole thing is now, Kevin, if you want to consume a whole lot of high school football, get yourself on Twitter on a Friday night, and you can get it all right there. It's usually, like you're saying, you want to watch one or two games. I mean, I could tell you here with Round Rock ISD, and we're fortunate that we have Round Rock ISD in our conglomerate of stuff. you want to know what Stony Point's doing in Westwood and Round Rock and all those. It maybe bounce around a little bit, but all the other stuff, I mean, we are overcomplicating this way too much, and that was never the intention, I'm sure, of anyone in the early stages of doing this to make it that way.
You know why I wanted to start this? Because back in my days in small market radio in East Texas, and small market radio, small town radio, the station owns your whole life. I mean, typical Friday, get up at 4:30 a.m., go in, do the morning show, go make a bunch of commercials, have lunch, come back, make another bunch of commercials, head out of town, do the football game, come back, hit the lake club for a beer before you go home, and then you get up Saturday morning and go do 2 remotes. That was my life at KYYK FM in Palestine, Texas, circa 1994 and 95. But the one thing out of all that I love more than anything was doing high school sports, specifically high school football. So I'm like, I want to recreate that when I land in Austin, first with Intercom and then Clear Channel. Nobody wants to do that, or they have one broadcast and there's no room for anybody on it. So eventually I run, I meet Chuck Licata. I start helping. He used to do the Friday night scoreboard show on the Zone, on 1300 The Zone. And Twitter didn't exist yet. Facebook didn't exist yet. We're talking circa 2002, 2003 here. And so I was the guy on the phone calling around, getting scores from all these schools and all these towns.
Yeah.
And hint, if you want to know who won, if you want to know who won the game in Thrall, call the Dairy Queen. Mm-hmm. That's the first people outside the stadium going to know.
Yeah, but that makes sense. And Kevin, I remember growing up as a kid. I mean, it used to be that you would either have to do one thing. For me, growing up in Lockhart, when I was a kid, you either had to go downtown to the square and see if maybe somebody got back from wherever the game was and could give you a score, or imagine this, you had to rely on the Austin American Statesman in the morning that would have, 3 or 4 pages of high school coverage where you went and found how your team did. That stuff actually used to happen. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, that's crazy. Who wants to wait till morning for that? Lord.
What's a newspaper?
And you know what? Nowadays, there's 100 people in the stands with one of these live streaming the winning touchdown. So, but, back to the business aspect for a second. I agree. I get why it exists. I get why pay-per-view exists. I get the business model. I get it. I'm just personally against it after all my experiences. I agree with you. Grandma in Montana shouldn't have to pay to watch her grandkid play. But the other thing that I don't like, and you touched on this when you mentioned competition. I actually said this to Rick Epstein one time when we met for lunch. I said, okay, so you started this thing, Texan Life's coming in. And I told him, I've been doing this since 2003. Every single year, someone comes in, throws a whole bunch of money at it, steals a couple of clients, and says they're going to run everyone out of business. So, and I don't know if that was supposed to be I tell you what, that was Burt Brocker's intention with Texan Live. But he sold out to Dave Campbell. Now, I'm sorry, you had a comment? Go ahead.
No. I was just kind of chuckling at all of that.
Yeah. Well, can nobody sue me for any of that? I already made sure of that. Plus, he's no longer involved in that business, which, as you know, Texan Live is run by the Dave Campbell organization now.
Sure.
But what I loved about this go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's kind of the hard part, Kevin, is to where it's gone all about, to me, selling subscriptions. And that, to me, that's unfortunate because it needs to be about, like I just keep saying, needs to be about the kiddos and their families and exposing them and letting people see what they do. I mean, it's a lot of work that they put into this, but it's big business, with NIL and everything that we see right now. It's such a drastic shift to where everything has become such a business. And I never thought that I would see high school sports broadcasting become such a business, and that's
Yeah.
really what it's become. That's really what it's become.
And you know, another thing Texan Live existed for was to generate highlights to sell to Fox Sports Southwest. So, so
Yeah,
like
that's true.
if your camera shot ever went crazy, you heard about it. And
Yeah,
I don't think that's right either.
yeah, that's exactly right.
But here we are. And one good thing that came out of that is the UIL changed the rules, which I'm sure you're aware of. Now, both the home team and the away team can have their own broadcast, and the home team can't block it anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing that came out of that. That really came out of that whole conflict that year.
Well, I understood in 2020 when all of that happened because folks either couldn't or didn't want to be at a football stadium, and I totally get that, and I appreciate that. But when all of that came down, Kevin, I was like, well, this is just another part of a legacy with high school football and UIL and everything that's about to end, because when they said we're going to test it. We're going to test it because we need to do it right now. I'm like, Katie, bar the door. We're
That's
done.
the video on Friday nights.
Video on Friday night.
Yeah.
And that was always the nice thing to me because I mean it was so cool back, and I'm going back to the KMAC days as well. I mean when I started on and we jumped on with Westwood when I came on in 2009 or 10, whenever it was, and they were really, really good. And we had folks that would jump online and listen to just the audio broadcast of that. And again, back in those days, they had no other means of watching it. So they'd sit there and listen to it and then wait until however long it was to when we were able to populate the video up. Whenever we had the green light to do it, they'd go back and rewatch it. So at that point, we had double viewership times however many people. So, I mean, I got to tell you, to me, it was it was kind of the end of a really cool thing when they lifted the Friday night video thing. I totally get it, but I don't know, man. I kind of wish they put it back in place. I mean, I don't know. I'm just old, man. I am just old, I guess.
No, I mean, and I had a very steep learning curve myself, going up the video ladder, if you will. I mean, I'm an old radio guy, man. I'm no BS. I did the best, brightest, tightest football broadcast on the Vipe Live network, KMAC, or as it became later, Vipe Live. I'm not bragging. That's just a fact. People can say I'm bragging. I don't care. And then when we had to add video, it was just the clunkiest, craziest. I couldn't get a smooth flow anymore. It's better now. But yeah, like you said, it's just not what I came up doing. And I miss being able to do an excellent radio show as opposed to a passable video show.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, Kevin, and I still do it. I still do it on video. I don't care. I'm not going to stop doing it.
No.
Where, I mean, I like to say trips wide, blitz is coming, 4-man front, and I'm over. I'm just, I think so much of the fascination for me, I mean, I grew up listening to, Brad Sham and Vern Lundquist and all of these guys that, I mean, even on the baseball side, listening to Vin Scully, I mean, guys that painted an audio picture, and that's the beauty of what they do. And I just think that's why we got in this business. That's why we do this, because we want to paint that picture. We want to talk about a man in motion, and he stops. Now he's going in motion right. No, now he's going left. I mean, yeah, people can see it, but to me, I put myself as a fan sitting watching the game in the stadium, and that's the stuff I see, and that's the stuff I'm going to talk about. And just audio is just so refreshing. Every now and then, I love it when the playoffs start. I love it when the playoffs start and somebody tells me it's audio only. I'm like, ooh, game on. We going to town right now.
Oh my God. Yeah, and I say that because I agree with that for one reason, because my camera case weighs 20 pounds. So if I don't, that's one less thing you got to haul in the building. But
yeah.
And the interesting thing here, and I don't know if you'd agree with this or not. Well, something that I just realized the other day, the handwriting may actually be on the wall in a sense. Well, because these pay-per-view services do tend to be a little bit predatory on schools. Here's $50,000. We'll do all your games. And oh, by the way, we own the video and we can sell as much of it as we want. And you can't say anything about it. And we only have to do one of your school. Well, you know how it goes. And now you're familiar with the huddle cam, right?
Oh, yeah.
With that whole thing. So
yeah.
now they're, that's completely automatic. And they're like, oh yeah, just put your PA announcer's audio on it. You don't need anybody. And now they're including a production suite in it. Pretty much like the vMix screen that I'm looking at right now. And I don't know what you're on these days, OBS or vMix or what, but they're just giving that to the school and saying, here, put a student on it. I'm like,
yeah.
I kind of see the handwriting on the wall, at least for me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to maintain this for more than a couple more years down the road. But since I don't do it for money, I don't do it for the money. I get money, but I don't do it for the money. It's more from a point of service for me. But
yeah. And that's really what it's all about. I mean, when you come down to it, and the thing for me is, Kevin, when you talk about that, when we start talking about the students and all that, I love it if a student comes up to me and they're like, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain about how to broadcast." And certainly, I am no Joe Buck, but
wait,
when
everybody
somebody
hates Joe Buck. You don't hate Joe Buck?
Okay. I love his style. I mean, I like, what I love about that dude is that he'll do football, he'll do baseball, he'll do golf, he'll do whatever. And so many of these broadcasters these days are like, I only do football, or I'm just a basketball guy. And I mean, if you're hungry or if you're starving, you gonna call whatever. Kevin, I've called parades where people will pay me to go MC a parade and stream that stupid shit somewhere. I don't know if I can cuss on here, but
sure.
I mean, dude, I will call anything. I'll call a race of donkeys, mules. You can pour molasses down the street and I'll call that race. I mean, it's, there's a lot of the servant part that you're talking about, but it's so much of it is. And I think, we're older dudes, but Kevin, you just never know who's going to listen to this podcast that we are doing tonight and love this. And God forbid they want to put you and I on morning radio in California. You just never know. Push content and push good content. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
And that's what I've started doing with this. And hopefully within the next 10 or 20 episodes, it'll get good. But you know what? The thing is, you got to start with something. You got to start somewhere. Yeah. If you don't do the bad work at first, not that this is bad, this is actually going really, really well, but you got to do the bad work at first to get good. Like my first job in radio was babysitting the Sunday morning religious programs on an AM station. Yeah, you go in at 6 a.m. and it's just church program after church program after church program. You got to tape from the Lutherans, you got to tape from the Catholics, you got to tape from the Pentecostals, you got to tape from the Scientologists, depending on where you are. And then you take that up to 11, and then you have the live, service coming in over Marty from, the First Mega Baptist Church of Corsicana land. And that's how everybody in my town, or everybody I knew in the early days, got in. And what is great about today's technology is you don't have to wait for someone to give you that job. Yeah. We ran the student program at Del Valle last year. It was mixed success, but they were asking me, well, how would you do a podcast? I don't have anything at home. It's like, you got a computer, right? It's got a microphone in it, right? It's got a webcam in it, right? So go home and press replay and just start talking. Or if you don't have that, everybody's got this in their pocket.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And the funny thing is, to me, it's like everyone I know, for me, for the longest time, and that's where I've had to kind of change my mindset, as I've gotten older and wiser and been beat down, time after time. It's like for everyone, the ultimate goal is whether it be radio or television. And yeah, I mean, those are the great jobs. And there's only going to be a few of us that are going to make, top market dollar in either one of those TV or radio things. I mean, you've got the morning drive people, you got the afternoon guys that may be doing okay. I don't think it's near what it used to be back in the old days, but that was the ultimate goal. And I think that a lot of youngsters that start in this now, they don't want to put the work in. They don't want to do what you're talking about right there. They don't want to sit and do those, try to engineer or produce the gospel shows and do all of this. Although it's drastically different to get content on terrestrial radio now than it used to be. I totally get that. But I mean, for me, when I get a lot of people that say, hey, it's got to be cool to do the revved up thing on the radio. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty gratifying because you have no clue what I had to do to get that opportunity. It was dragging my ass around in a van, going off, doing whatever, and finally got the opportunity to where somebody heard something that I did. And here's where somebody heard something that I did, Kevin, was at a streaming baseball game on KMAX Sports between Lake Travis and Hayes. And that's what opened the door to get to be on the radio. But people don't want to put that work in. It's like, I need to be on the radio right now. I need to be national. I need to be regional. That shit don't work anymore.
No,
that's not how it works.
And the reason I'm laughing when you tell me all that is because, as I recall, I think I said to you, yeah, they'll never hire you.
Absolutely.
You can go out and do all this smut work, all the scut work you can, and no, they'll never hire you. And no. You know what? I couldn't be happier to have been proven wrong. I really couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, I mean, a lot of that was, and I can tell youngsters right now, get out there and network, get out there and talk to people. But when you're going to get out there and do whatever you're going to do, you have to, when you're going out there talking smack about how good you are, you better be ready to prove it, because you're going to have about 30 seconds. Yeah. You better get after it. But it really is funny to me, Kevin, with all of that being said about radio. Yeah, radio is great. I mean, it's cool. But honestly, to me, I think the coolest part is to see how what we're doing right now, whether it be podcasting, live streaming, how it has evolved, and everybody wants to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got national radio talent that are doing podcasts each and every week, just like you and I are doing. And that speaks volume to what you guys, I mean, seriously, Kevin, I know you, I think you underscore it, what you guys did, because man, y'all set a really nice tone here, giving us lots of opportunities.
And my biggest challenge, the thing that I love the most about, well, I'll just tell you, the first time I rolled into Thunderhill, I'm like, well, you want me to do a show here?
I got Daytona.
So I didn't know. I wasn't into racing, and I'm still, and I was just having this conversation with Aaron Brungut the other day, who's kindly offered me a job with Race On Texas. Just asked me to come out and be a producer now and then, which is amazing. I was so happy to hear from that. But I'm like, I'm not the big race fan, but so I didn't know what I was walking into at Thunderhill. And this was before they did the remodel. I think I don't know, maybe sometime around 7.
Yeah.
And I went in there. I'm like, okay, because I mean, no Wi-Fi, no LAN. The only way I got to get out of here is like a 4600 baud phone line that's 5 doors down. Now, I don't think we ever had to resort to that. I think you remember you used to have the little 2G cards that you plugged into the side of the computer.
Absolutely.
The PCMCIA card. So I think we wound up using that. And they're like, okay, how do I get track sound? I have no way to get anything down to the side. So I had this tiny little $10 mic I bought off the shelf at Fry's and run like 100 feet of cord down to the end of the balcony and just hung it over.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got it done, and it sounded good. Yeah. And after that, I knew I could do anything.
Yeah.
Like if I can get a show out of here, I can get it out of anywhere.
And you know what you're going to be amazed to see. I don't know how much that you've been privy to with Race On and that opportunity, but that it is drastically different right now with the racing stuff. I mean, everything that you see with Race On Texas and Racing America and Flow Sports and all the folks that are doing really, really cool things is you turn a race on and it is a multicam broadcast. I mean, you've got great track sound. I mean, everything. I mean, a lot of that seriously is you've got to have an announcer that's going to drive this thing.
Yeah.
Because you know, between the announcer and the producer, whoever's running that, I mean, it's like boom, you're bouncing off each other. It really is. I mean, it's like when you turn the Sunday race on Fox or NBC. That's what these streaming things have turned into. And you know, Kevin, it's the same thing. They are selling really nice memberships. It's like, man, we're back to that again. But I totally get it. And with Race on Texas, it is so funny to look back at how that has progressed back to the day where you had one camera, and you do still have that at some racetracks, but it is night and day. And for racing, I can tell you, with racing being, you know, right in the middle of all that stuff, streaming is what drives the sport because people can't get to the racetrack anymore. And you're going to love what you're jumping into, my friend. I can promise you that.
I think so. And I think there's a difference between the average race fan and the average, say, high school football fan, is that the average
Mhm.
race fan wants to look in on 20 different races as the night goes on. They want
Yep.
all that content coming in at once. And so, you know, you want to watch 20 races at once. Okay. I don't have a problem collecting a little to cover that cost. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm actually very excited to be with that, to be part of that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd ever be up to, being a commentator for it, but I never thought I could call football. I never thought I could call basketball. I never thought I could call volleyball. I never thought I could call baseball and softball. This past year, when we talk about growing as a talent, right? I discovered that you can do anything when it needs to get done and you can't afford to pay anyone else to do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can tell you that's one thing I think for me was I think back in, I would say, 2016 or 17 when I got the opportunity to do Lake Travis baseball with still at the time KMAX Sports. It was something to where I really go back and look at that opportunity with Merle, that he reached out to me and he's like, hey, you know, do you want to do this? I had to audition for that. Lake Travis was like, we need a reel. I'm like digging for Westwood stuff. I'm like, okay, here was a great call. So Merle sends that off and they approved they approved that call. But it came down, that was a big shift for me in my, you know, career of doing this, to where at that time I realized I need to learn the video aspect, I need to learn the audio aspect, because it was always hard for me because I always had all these ideas of things I wanted to do, but I had to have somebody like do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had to find somebody that was going to sit here and run a mixer, or run a vmix, or you know, back in those days, Meridix or Easy Stream. You know, I had no idea how to work any of that stuff, and that was really a year for me to where I went in and I learned that part. I learned the technical side, and I got to tell you, Kevin, I I love calling races. I love calling football, baseball, basketball. But to me, and I think you'll appreciate this, as my time has gone on in this, dude, I get giddy getting to do the back part. That, to me, that's the coolest shit there is. I mean, I love producing broadcasts.
Well, that's
Isn't
cool.
that crazy?
No, actually, that's my favorite part of it. I only became,
Absolutely.
if you remember from back in the day, I never wanted to be on the mic. Well, except when we had our little studio down on the corner of Ghetto and Industrial. Now that's the
Oh,
first incarnation of what I say it is, which was a
that's a
whole
beauty
different
right
show.
there.
But
Yeah.
um, I never wanted to be on the mic out in the field. I always wanted to be just the guy behind the controls. And
Right.
so, and credit where due, Chuck and Merle gave me the opportunity in Del Valley for football season in 19. And I said, "Oh, you need a producer." They say, "No, we need a producer and a color commentator." Well, and I'm thinking, okay, well, and doing the little podcast you and I did for a short time, the most important podcast ever, and going out with you on those games, it kind of whet my appetite again. It kind of reawakened the passion. I'm like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I'll,
Sorry to Lisa. I'm sorry, Lisa, if you're going to catch us on
I'll punish you
podcast.
for that later. But,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it brought that up, and I'm like, okay, what the hell? And I've never been a student of the game. You know, I never been okay. You've frozen. Have I lost you? I think I lost him. Oh, there you are. You
Nope.
froze for a second. But as I was saying, I'd never been the kind of football fan who's going to watch the game and break down plays and this, that, and the other, and remember stats and stuff. But I thought, okay, why not? Challenge accepted. And I still tell everybody this. I figured if I can't be informative, I'll at least be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked. As it has gone on the last 3 years, I've become more informative. But I've told this story to everyone I've talked to, but I don't know if I ever told it to you. You know, when I first met with Daniel Chancellor, he's like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody even listens. We haven't been that good, etc. Basically, he was telling me nobody had any expectations. And I said, if nobody has any expectations, then we can do whatever the hell we want. So we did. And it was a winning combination.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you can't be afraid to jump in. So we had the contract last year to do all the sports, mostly just home games. And so he calls football and I do color commentary and everything else on the whole show. And then we get to volleyball and he's like, all right, I'll take volleyball. All either one of us knew about it was girls hit a ball across the net back and forth. And then it came to basketball. And he's like, well, I don't know if I can work fast enough to keep up with basketball. Well, I don't know if I can either. He's like, well, I picked up volleyball. It's your turn. So next thing I know, I'm the volleyball or the basketball play-by-play guy for Del Valle High School.
Yeah.
And then we went into soccer. And so if I had to give anyone any advice, never turn away an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, I agree. And you said something earlier when you were talking about the house park situation right there. And I really like, and I'm not surprised coming from you, where you said that when all of that happened, that it took away from your prep time.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is so important to, I don't care if it's a veteran person or a young broadcaster, male or female, whatever, man, be prepared. Go in there. I know that on-air talent, they like to roll in and just go to work. You know, we've talked about that, but I mean, get in there and be prepared to work. I mean, put that work in. I'm not saying, spend, 6 hours a day working on this stuff. I overconsume myself. I mean, Kevin, it's so funny. Like for me, with my 1 hour radio show and my 1.5 hour, Monday revved up show, I will sit there and I have all of this content ready just in case. If a guest is going to cancel, if there's a pinch or whatever, be prepared. I mean, don't sit there and act like you don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, that's the age in me again. I mean, be prepared. Do the work. The work. That is so important.
Back in the day, we called that show prep. And even if you were just the evening DJ, you were expected to be prepped. You're expected to. And I'm not so sure that anybody really does that anymore. When you're voice tracking radio stations hundreds of miles away, do you ever do anything anymore but song intros and just station promo liners? And I don't hear much of that. I really don't hear much of that. Of course, I don't even hardly listen to terrestrial radio anymore. I listen to podcasts now, which I should really start listening to yours again. But
well, it's the same old shit it's always been. But Kevin, I'm curious to ask you. I mean, this is your show, but I'm curious to you. I mean, talking about and we've had this conversation before, but it's been a couple of years with radio, the way that it's changed. Your thoughts on that? I mean, because it did used to be, you can talk about small town radio and all that, but man, it is a totally different game right now.
Well, first off, most of the small town radio stations that exist today are no longer standalone operations. They're either owned by one of the majors or they might be owned by a local or regional business person who's got them in a regional network. Um,
Sure.
Will Payne up in Oklahoma is a really good example of that, but he's and I don't know the man personally. I met him a couple of times at Texas Motor Speedway, but he's all over Facebook. And that group up there in southern Oklahoma, far north Texas, is an example, I think, of how to do small town radio right. You know, you can
Yeah.
pull resources, and yes, you have to voice track amongst the different stations, but you're able to keep it local. Um, and I feel like the entry level's gone. The minor leagues are
Yeah.
gone. You know, that kid who would walk in and be willing to come in at 0600 and just run the church programs while struggling to stay awake all day because there wasn't a computer. You couldn't get on the internet. You couldn't text your girlfriend, you know, although mine would have been pissed off at me for texting her at 6 a.m, but that's gone. You know, the Sunday shows, probably somebody loads them in the computer during the week, or they just come in over the cloud and they just automatically load up, or the program director / general manager / traffic manager / sales manager / morning and afternoon DJ does it, you know. And that goes back to what I said about small town radio basically owning your ass. It's your whole life. You don't do it unless you love it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons it all got so consolidated is that's a hard business model to keep up on your own. It really is. So many of these guys in the 90s and early 2000s, especially after the Communication Act in 96, you know, you're like, man, I'm barely keeping this thing on the air. And here's something I'm familiar with. I'm paying everybody but myself. You know, the transmitter needs tuning, the tower's falling apart. The FCC says they're going to shut us down if we can't fix the EBS system. And then a Clear Channel or a Cumulus or somebody from the town next door comes in and says, hey, here's $1.5 million. Let me take this off your hands. And I'll assume all debt. Only an idiot's going to say, yeah, no, you know, I'm just going to sit here in this chair right here and do 50 jobs every day that I used to be able to pay 10 people to do. So, you know, a lot of people think consolidation started from the top down. In some ways, it started from the bottom up. And what do I think of radio today? I can't hardly listen to it. Now, some of it is personal here in the Austin market because, well, you know, some of the history I had at Clear Channel.
Sure.
And way back in the day, I was far from the best version of myself. Say back in the early 2000s, or as I like to say, my life wasn't a train wreck. My life was the shitstorm that caused the train wreck. So I think that, and because of my association, my more recent association with Mr. L, we'll just say that, not to badmouth him or anything, just some shit happened and we both paid the price for it. But because of that association and earlier associations, I feel like the door back into terrestrial radio is kind of close to me. And maybe I'm better for it because I can't go back. I thought about it for years, sat around depressed about it for years, went out and did shitty jobs I hated for years. No, I've, and you know, you're the guest. Now you got me spilling my guts. But I can't hardly stand terrestrial radio anymore. I can listen to sports broadcasts. There's maybe a couple of local talk shows I like, but I listen to podcasts right now. Mike Rowe is my biggest hero. Yeah, you're familiar with him, right?
Oh yeah,
the guy from Dirty Jobs. He has an amazing podcast. In fact, I'm basically ripping off his format because, you know, I mean, emulation is the purest form of flattery. I did send a donation
right.
to his foundation just to, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And like I said, I mean, I think to me, I mean, the beauty of it is that, having you in the fold, I mean, you doing this, I mean, growing this podcast, and I think that what you're doing here, I think you're going to do some really cool things right here. It's the whole thing with podcasting to me is, and I tell people all the time, it's like you got to get it in front of the right people, and that's easier said than done, because what are the right people? I mean, and so much of it, Kevin, what I've learned over the years is hashtagging, is I mean, all of this stuff. I mean, it's all this stupid stuff that you would never think that can kind of to grow you into whatever audience you're trying to find. But I think with what you're doing here, I think you're going to, I mean, there are so many real conversations you want to have.
mhm.
And that's what I have figured out when it comes to podcasting and streaming, is people want to hear real stories, and they want to hear real details. And I mean, if it's a bad thing, I mean, people want to hear a bad story, but at the same time, people want to hear a resilient story. And I think that's what this really affords us the thing to do. Like I said earlier, anybody can do it, which is great. And at the same time, anybody can do it, which is bad. But you hit that thing right there, and I think you can blow this thing up, dude, because you just, with all the talent that you have, and just your life experiences that you have had, and the people that you know, and connections and everything, I think that you can really do some good stuff with
Well,
this.
thank you. And you know what has been especially gratifying is COVID, and COVID basically had me isolated here in the house.
Hmm.
And during 20, and I'm sitting around here wondering, do I even got any friends anymore? And the benefit to starting this up again is discovering that yes, I do, and I always did. So if for nothing else, it's been it's being some really good therapy.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I got to tell you, during that isolation, I learned a hell of a lot how to do different things with all this stuff.
yeah,
So it wasn't really a bad thing. Wasn't really a bad thing when you look at it big picture wise.
when you look at it big picture, it's not. I don't think it's what you were going through at the time, but it's how you came out of it that really
That's
matters.
right.
I really do.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we've been talking
All right.
almost an hour already. I don't know if you're in a rush or anything, or you want to talk some more, but I want to give you a chance to get your shameless plugs in. So I know you still
Well,
do the Revved Up Sports Show, right?
yeah. That's on Mondays at revvedupsportshow.com and on Facebook. But it's not so much about that, Kevin. I mean, it's been good opportunities, for me with that, and doing the Dirty Air show on Racing America. That's all cool, and the Horn Show. But I mean, when you came to me and wanted to talk about all of this, I mean, it's about growing everything that we do. And I feel a lot of redemption for we old guys. I mean, for we old school guys,
Right.
that we're sitting here having podcast conversations that you're going to launch out into the cloud that you talked about, and they're going to get to hear. They're going to get to hear how all this started. I mean, because you mentioned about, talking about youngsters having a computer and a microphone and all that, and they're like, boom, watch this. But man, they don't know the stories of K-Mac Sports and Kevin McAdam and all those old times, man. They don't know how hard this shit used to be.
And they don't, and some of them don't even have an appreciation for its
Oh,
value. Case in
right.
point, when we did the class last year, the first day, one of the boys is like, "Okay, so you're doing you're putting sports on the internet." I said, "Well, more importantly, we're doing live television production on the
Hmm.
internet. Sports just happens to be the subject matter, but the skills we're trying to teach you will serve you well in any media." And this kid goes, "Well, I got a game stream on Twitch and I have 500 followers. So you really can't teach me anything." And
Hmm.
the saddest part of that is in the year 2021, he wasn't 100% wrong. He's not even 90% right, but he wasn't 100% wrong. And I think that's in our business, I think that's maybe an obstacle or if there's any way we can learn how to lean into it. And maybe there are people already doing that who are more advanced than me. But what are your thoughts on that?
I have sent my, and I still do it. I send the Revved Up Monday show out on Twitch, and I get very little feedback. I mean, I get very little response or live viewers because I mean, for the folks that are checking in on Twitch, my show is boring because it's two guys sitting around talking to people on the phone and showing some highlights and all that. It's just not. That's not what that audience wants to hear and or watch, and that's still so weird for me to say that want to watch, but it I love those platforms. I mean, I love all of that. I mean, the folks that jump on and do all the zany videos and all of that, those are the big stars these days. What's that called?
TikTok.
TikTok, the TikTok thing. It's like folks have talked to me many times. They're like, "Hey, won't you jump on TikTok and do?" I'm like, my stuff doesn't work on TikTok. I'm sitting around talking. Nobody wants to see a dude standing or sitting around talking, and there are just so many different avenues for folks to take in their content, and that's where it's so different. I mean, and that's why I really embrace the streaming. And like I said, when I get to do just a straight up online or radio audio broadcast, I'm like, oh, that's what it's all about right there. That's why I love doing this stuff.
And that might be a good place to leave it for now. But I wanted to share just a couple of things with you. One, you talked about enjoying, painting the picture. And
Mm-hmm.
in all my experience, of all the people I've ever worked with, you're top two in being able to do that. I won't tell you if you're number one or number two because I don't want to inflate your head, but you were
That's
right up
okay.
there in my estimation. And I think, you can tell me if you agree with this or not. I think that, and I tried to make this point to the students too, it's not about calling sports so much as it is learning to describe what you see in front of you and make somebody else understand it. For instance, you mentioned Joe Buck, and you're the only person on earth who apparently likes Joe Buck. Me, I got no opinion. But I'm going to tell you who my favorite network sportscasters are: Johnny Weir and Tara Lipinski. Now you know who they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
NBC Sports lead figure
Absolutely.
skating team. I don't give a crap about figure skating. I watch it like every 4 years when it's on the Olympics because my wife likes to. And I like that we can enjoy that together. But Weir and Lipinski are somehow able to make me care about something for an hour that I don't give a damn about any other time. And I come away knowing more about the sport and having been entertained. And that's where it's at for me. What do you think?
I agree because I can tell you, whether it be on the football side or with racing or any of it, whatever I'm doing. Ken Squire is a guy that was from up north. He was a PA/radio guy that did racing, did sports, did different things. Ken Squire was actually a guy that called curling way back before people knew what curling was back in the Olympics, and he had a fascinating way of doing that. And he is one of the guys that when one of the things that I always tell people when it comes to broadcasting or whatever it is, learn from the greats. Go and listen to how they did it, like what you're saying right there. Go back and find that style. Don't rip them off. Don't rip off their taglines. Don't do the whole Craig way. Light the tower. Yeah, that's his.
Yeah.
I mean, listen to those people that do really great work. But Ken Squire is a guy that I sat there and I listened to him. I've gone back and I've listened to him on radio back in the 70s and 60s and his PA stuff, the things that he did, how he turned that into becoming a great TV broadcaster. He would talk about gladiators battling and, 4,000-pound monsters and a jam session and all this different stuff. It didn't matter if you were just listening to it or watching it. You would sit there and get encapsulated with how he described it. And that is really what our duty is. I don't care if it's video or audio. Exactly what you're saying. We go in and we do something. It is always a goal for me, even like if I'm doing a district championship game, or which I haven't done in a while, but if I'm doing a championship game or a $10,000, $20,000 to win race, the goal for me is I want my audio or video watcher, I want them to get chills. I want them to get chills. And if I'm describing a emotional situation, I want them to tear up. I want them to hear what I'm saying, and I want them to feel it. That's when I know that I've done my job. And that's the thing, Kevin. You know it as well as I do. It's our job. It's our passion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we do this. We don't do it for the money. Otherwise, you and I would have both quit doing this a long time ago. So that's why we do it. We're just driven. It's purposeful. That's why we do it.
In my case, I did quit it a long time ago, but it wouldn't quit me. So here I am again.
Oh, it's impossible. It's impossible.
It really is.
And it the thing is, I mean, we really are doing a service. I mean, we really are. Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. And I just there are a lot of folks that have said, "Oh, about podcasting. Having a podcast, it ain't that big a deal." I'm like, bullshit. If you're doing it right, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It needs to be a big deal.
Well, I remember
that drives me crazy.
When you and Bobby were first getting the Revved Up Sports Show online, I remember you came to me for advice. And now, actually, not now, but I'm going to start coming to you for advice because the student has totally become the master here. Seriously.
I mean, Kevin, you know what it is? I mean, I will seriously tell you, be consistent. Do it all the time. Push content. And that's, my wife is always like, "Are you going to take a week off?" I'm like, "No, I've got to push something out." And it gets frustrating because, I mean, you go back, and I'm numbers driven. I go back and I listen to everything and watch everything that we do. It doesn't matter if it's revved up, or I'm going to go back and probably watch this or listen to this time after time. But you have to go back and figure out a way to make yourself better and just keep pushing content. There are so many people where it's like they come out of the gate and it's like boom, boom, boom. Then where'd they go?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just have to stay in front of people because you never know who's listening. You never know who's listening or watching.
That sounds like a great place to. That sounds like a great place to leave.
I made you pause. That's that, man.
No, I can't say that any better than that. I can't add anything to that. That statement is pure perfection. So
nice.
You're welcome. So where are you at this fall, football wise?
It should be mostly with Westwood. As far as I know, we've got Round Rock ISD. I'll kind of be jumping in on different things there on some Thursday games or whatever. But looking forward to a great season. It's always fun. It kind of just the whole discussion that we've been having. It doesn't matter if your team wins 10 games or if they win 0, because I've been on both sides of it. To me, it's like you see the families. You hear the band, you see the student section out there just enjoying what you're doing. And honestly, Kevin, the coolest part for me is that there have been so many kids that with the opportunity that you guys gave me way back when, that still check in with me, that may have graduated in 2010, and they hit me up on Twitter and they're like, "Hey, I check into Westwood, or I check into Lake Travis, or, whatever it is. Or I caught your Stony Point game. I was class of 2012 and you call some of my games." That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And I've got great relationships with those parents and booster club folks. And that's high school sports to me. That's why we do it.
There you go. In fact, I think Del Valle will have their traditional opener against McNeil's. So I don't know if I'll see you for that or not, but if I do, I'll be looking forward to it. And you are all over the place with short track racing right now. Even, is it Alabama you go to, or?
Yeah, lots of Alabama, and there's some other opportunities there that may fall into place. But the thing is, for me, with racing, I grew up at racetracks, and I've my dad gave me chances to race and spent a lot of money to let me go tear his shit up, and people handed, Marianne Nauman handed me a microphone and let me talk. And that was that time, Kevin, where I mentioned it early, where I was like, I got to find that thing that nobody else was doing. And luckily for me, I jumped onto that one. Nobody else around here is doing racing, and I've been very fortunate and blessed, very blessed, that people for some reason want to hear me rattle on about what I think about that stupid stuff, and that's a good thing.
That world's been good to me too. I feel blessed that when Aaron Brookgott needed a guy, he called me. When he needed it, so I'm like, yeah, let's go. And if I'm working for Race On, I'll probably see you out there sometime.
Well, and that's a cool part for me when you mentioned that to me, was as much as that has evolved. When you said that he reached out to you, I'm like, all right, he's going. I've said it, Kevin. I've said it. He's going to the innovator, because I know you play it down, but dude, so many of us learned from you. When I talk about learning from the greats, you're right there, dude. You're right there.
No, and that's not it at all this time. I went out there. Okay, I went out there to Cotton Bowl and I met their production manager, Tony, and I was learning from him. Yep. And I looked at his system. I'm like, this dude's like 2 cuts above what I've been doing. I am here to learn. I'm just the help, man. It's just another thing of, some guys get older and they think they got to be the boss all the time and yada, yada, yada. Nobody can teach me anything. We can't afford to be like that.
No,
because some of the young people actually know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
And if we want to work, we got to listen to them and learn from them.
And that's the biggest part. I mean, that's life in general. I mean, always be learning. It's put the ego away and just go out there and evolve and learn. I mean, because things have changed so much. I mean, think about it. Like I was talking about earlier, when we had all those KMAC broadcasts, audio broadcasts, to what everything else has become now, dude. You better evolve or get the hell out. Yeah, One of the two. You got two choices.
Well, I guess that's a great place to leave it. Any parting comments?
No, man. I mean, just for me, thank you for wanting to swap some old stories and talk about some new opportunities. I'm very excited for you with what you've got going on. Welcome back to Central Texas Short Track Racing. I'm excited to have you back in the fold, and I know there are great things to come for you. And like I said, man, always a pleasure to get to talk with you.
No, same here. And we will do this again. We will do this again sometime soon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had a great sign-off line, and now I forgot all about it. So.
You're like, see you.
Yeah, see you out there. There you go.
Yeah, see you out there. Absolutely. Looking forward to that, man.